Premiers say the federal government isn't dealing fairly with provinces when it cuts funding deals for housing directly with municipalities.
I think there's a shared concern that there is a federal government that is increasingly looking at the potential political benefits, for lack of a better term, of circumventing the provinces and landing in a Toronto or Vancouver and dropping a housing program strictly for political gain.
But today, federal ministers are pushing back on that idea.
If we are living in a crisis situation, we cannot afford to take a solution off the table.
What we saw yesterday is something which is quite contrary to what we're hearing from municipalities themselves and what premiers themselves have said.
They can't wait for provinces and territories to get their act together.
Okay, we're going to assess all of this debate with the Power Panel. Vanguard Strategy CEO Michele Cadario is here, as is Françoise Boivin, a former NDP MP and a political commentator. The CBC's Jason Markusoff joins us, and here with me in studio, Denise Siele is a senior advisor with Artful Strategies. Hello, gang. Michele, just when you thought it was safe to start building houses in this country, the premiers say this is the latest assault on how the country is supposed to operate. What do you make of their criticism that they should have a bigger role at the table here?
Well, nothing gets the provincial feathers more in a ruffle than the feds kind of overstepping them and starting to look at do deals with the municipalities. It really harkens back to when I was working for Prime Minister Martin and the whole gas tax and getting money directly to municipalities for infrastructure and roads. And at that time, for if that could help housing as well, monies could be for that. So, it's kind of like a big roundabout thing. I am confident that, deals will be struck, money will flow. And of course, the feds are going to, use what the tools that they have. I think it's a great idea. Get some money into the municipalities, give them some incentive to move projects along. I don't think that the public will have one iota of sympathy for any of the premiers being all uppity about how this is happening. They just want to see action. And so I think that the feds are doing the right thing.
So Denise, on this point, we've seen Sean Fraser, the housing minister, cutting a bunch of deals through the Housing Accelerator Fund. The premiers say they're being cut out of that. We do also see premiers quite often almost demanding that the feds intrude into their jurisdiction, at least when it comes to providing money. How do you think this is going to play?
I don't know that it's that premiers demanding intrusion. What they're saying is there is a circumvention of what we understand in terms of jurisdictionality, where the municipalities have every right to ask for more money, but the provinces are saying, well, hang on a second. You're making deals with certain municipalities based on who has been elected and who has not been elected. And I think, it's quite right for the premiers to say, well, hang on a second. Can we get a fair deal, a new deal? And my colleague just mentioned a new deal under Paul Martin, and he was the one about a decade ago who sort of started to talk about a new deal directly to municipalities. And the premiers are right to say, well, hang on a second. This is our jurisdiction. Well,
Françoise, Tim Houston chaired the premiers meeting yesterday as the chair of the Council of the Federation. He talked about the need to get the feds in. When he was on the show, I said, could this slow things down? He said, no, it'll speed it up. There's a story on our website now, Mike Savage, the mayor of Halifax, saying he believes it'll slow it down because in the past, the Nova Scotia government's been too slow to pass through federal money or do the matching money. And he's not just the mayor of Halifax, he's the chair of the Big City Mayors Caucus for the Federation of Canadian Municipalities. So what do you make of where this thing stands?
And I hear the same thing from some municipalities in Quebec, but let's face it, it's still a dangerous game for the feds to go directly to the municipality unless we have zero constitution. And I know that the people listening to me, my colleagues are right. There's a need, and I think that's what the feds are playing with. There's a need. Sympathy will not lie with the provinces saying, hey, wait, this is in of our jurisdiction. We need to address this together. Why can't these different levels not be able to work together is beyond me. And it is political, let's face it, because politics is very, very local. I remember because when I first sat as a Liberal in 2004, we were looking at ways that we could be relevant for people, for their day-to-day, and municipalities are the best conduit for that aspect. But when I say it's a dangerous game, David, I mean, we've got the carbon tax that is dividing the country. We've got now this where the premiers are going after the prime minister saying, hey, that's not the proper way to do. We had a health first ministers and with the prime minister actually was just a quick visit to hear what they were willing, the feds, to offer to the province and take it or leave it. We have yet to sit down together and see what best way to do things. And sadly, municipalities still have to abide by some provincial legislation. So it's going to be a big mess. It's dangerous to go too fast because they might do things wrong. And I think it's very, very, in my book, very disrespectful from the federal government, the way they're treating their partners in crime, the province, on that such serious topic.
Okay, so Jason, the Constitution and jurisdiction really matters when the premiers don't like what the federal government is doing. But when Tim Houston wants to do a school lunch program in Nova Scotia, which is his responsibility, he's looking to the federal government for money. When the city of Toronto needs help to deal with transit issues, which is Toronto's responsibility and Ontario's responsibility, they want the federal government to intrude into their constitutional areas with money. I mean, how political is this current stance that's going on the housing?
I mean, the feds are the feds are the checkbook for the provincial government, and that's on so many things. We talked earlier about Paul Martin and what he did. I'm old enough to remember time, August 2023 it was, I believe, when when people were pillorying Justin Trudeau for saying I'm going to act on housing even though it's not really a federal responsibility. Yeah. We're at the point where I think people are expecting every level of government to act on housing. Certainly, the polls and the Liberals' recent suffering in the polls suggest that the public thinks it is a federal responsibility and that they are largely the bearers of fault for the housing crisis, for cost of living problems. But to Françoise's point, the government levels of government have to get along. And if you have turf wars and this level of frustration between the provinces and the federal government on carbon tax, on housing turf jurisdictions, on so many other things, then there becomes great tension, especially when Quebec has a separate deal where the federal government has agreed to give Quebec a big block of funding and let them disperse it upon a certain level of criteria, which is the way the province likes the government to do that. So the consistency, I would understand that they'd have issue with that. However, if Pierre Poilievre becomes prime minister with his promises, this argument will come back tenfold because he's promising several interventions into municipal housing policy on this stuff. So I don't know if the feds don't win, if the provinces don't win with Trudeau. I'm not sure how much ground they'll get with on turf with Poilievre. So
Michele, their discomfort with the approach by the federal government aside, if you look at what has been done with the housing accelerator deals, the 7 deals that Sean Fraser has done with various cities over the past little while, he's gotten a lot of zoning changed to open up for housing in a way that I've not seen a premier or any of the people who are concerned about jurisdiction able to get these level of results. So I mean, you saw the pushback there from the federal government today, like talking about we can't wait for the provinces to get their act together. I think that gives us a pretty clear signal of where they're going to go on this, don't you think?
100%. There's no way they're going to backtrack when taxpayers don't care who's distributing the money or what. They just want to see the action done. And so if we're actually getting positive action, if we're seeing that projects are moving forward, if we're seeing that houses and housing is actually being built, then, the provinces are going to back off. And yes, you do need the provincial governments to be able to distribute the money because of how the Constitution works. There is that aspect to it. But I'm sure an adequate deal will be struck because a province will be pilloried if they somehow were the roadblock to action being taken in cities in their provinces. So I think the feds on this one are on high ground, and they've just got to continue to push ahead because the public, I believe, will be firmly behind them.
So Denise, on that point, how do you think the public will view it, for example, here in Ontario, where Fraser's been able to cut deals and the Greenbelt plan that the Ford government launched has been nothing but retreat and controversy ever since?
Well, when we talk about high ground, what we really need is shovels in the ground. And I would argue that Conservatives are really looking at how many homes can be built, knowing affordability, the housing crisis is massive, intense, and so it is not about what is being negotiated municipality by municipality, but it is what is good for Canadians lit large from coast to coast to coast. And therein lies the rub, that there's some deals being cut for parts of Canada and others where, people just look. Sleeping on the streets in Canada in 2023. That's problematic.
But Françoise, I guess what the premiers were laying out was a process argument yesterday, right? And what the feds are responding with today is a results rebuttal. And I know they have a long way to go on housing, but it seems like they're not going to get bogged down in a process fight based on what the premiers are saying now.
Well, I really wish the federal government well, but do you have an idea of how many municipalities and cities we have in Canada? So it's going to be a long process. I mean, we'll have a lot of visit from Minister Fraser and company to go hand out the checks. I mean, I really recommend to them to do what Quebec did, which is to stay to the federal. You don't deal with our municipality. The buck stops here. They made a deal together, the federal and Quebec, and let Quebec deal with all these municipalities who have their hand up.
Are they making progress on housing in Quebec? I mean, how are they doing with
yes, we are.
Yeah?
Yes, they are. But they just settled with the federal government not too long ago. I think a couple of weeks ago. So because it's all fine and dandy to make that big, and I was listening to those ministers, all of them saying, "Hey, we want result," and I'm thinking, wow, 3-4 cities. Do the calculation, people. It's going to take them a long time to get the end result. So I still say sit down with your partners and the municipalities because they know what needs to be done and which part of their city that they can move along and so on and so forth.
Right.
It's not such an easy thing between the shovel in the ground and to take the right decisions.
No, I hear you. And I think they got deals with 7 cities, but 540 more applications. So if they got to do all of those, and Jason, to give you the last word, if Sean Fraser's got to do all of those announcements, he's not going to see Nova Scotia for a long time. Just wrap it up, Jason.
I would imagine either which way they're going to ultimately they'd have to do some level of vetting with municipal funding if they, municipal projects if they were giving the money out to the province. Maybe not. Maybe not. Then so he gives the money to the feds, the provinces. Then it becomes their problem. Then it becomes their challenge and their race against the clock to get 500 and some applications done each by each.
Yeah, that's a good point to end it on. All right, I want to thank the Power Panel, Denise Siele, Françoise Boivin, Jason Markusoff, and Michele Cadario. Thanks so much, gang.